That's 4 Disney remakes in 1 year. Is that not completely insane? Hi there, my name is Tessa, and once upon a time I called myself a Disney fan. But those days are long behind me. I know that sounds harsh, but trust me, I have my reasons, and one of them is the company's current obsession with live-action remakes. Disney first experimented with the live-action format back in 1994 with The Jungle Book, although I actually think it has more in common with Tarzan, which came out 5 years later, than it does with the 1967 cartoon. The film makes Mowgli a young adult and gives him a real love interest. There's a human villain in addition to Shere Khan, and none of the animals talk this time around. Now, I'll admit that I have a soft spot for this movie because I watched it all the time as a kid, but even as an adult, I still think that it holds up. And that's mainly because they've changed the tone from this comedy musical to more of an epic adventure story. And if you like stuff like The Princess Bride or Hook, then you'll probably like this version of The Jungle Book. Disney's next attempt at the live-action format was in 1996 with 101 Dalmatians, which is a near shot-for-shot remake of the 1961 film, with the only changes being an update to the time period and the dogs no longer speaking. I actually remember not liking the movie as a kid because of how much I despised Roger. Jeff Daniels was just completely miscast. The only reason the movie isn't a complete failure in my book is because it has great visuals, fantastic costume design, and a top-tier performance by Glenn Close. And I was so glad when the sequel took the best part of the first movie, Cruella, and then gave her new people and pets to terrorize. It isn't perfect, but at least 102 Dalmatians does have an original story. Even at this point, I think it's clear that Disney was trying to profit off of an existing trend, with the 90s and 2000s being dominated by animal adventures, like Free Willy, Fly Away Home, Babe, and Black Beauty. That doesn't even include the half-dozen movies about canine characters, like Beethoven, Homeward Bound, White Fang, Lassie, Shiloh, Napoleon, Air Bud, the list goes on and on. However, the live-action Dalmatian movies weren't the smash hit that Disney was expecting, and they didn't return to the format for a solid decade. I wasn't a huge fan of the Alice in Wonderland live-action when it was first released, but in the years since, I've developed an appreciation for it. Although that's mainly because the live-actions that came afterwards were just so terrible that this is a masterpiece in comparison. I think that the idea behind the movie is really smart. It has a totally different tone from the original, but it still believably fits into the same universe and continuity. All the actors are giving really strong performances, and even though I do find it a bit CGI heavy at times, the uncanny valley thing works for this sort of psychedelic story. I also like that it's kind of dark and gory and strange, which is something that Disney does not do anymore because they prefer talking down kids and treating them like idiots. Alice in Wonderland was successful enough that Disney greenlit a live-action remake of 1959 Sleeping Beauty, but changed up the story so Maleficent was now the main character. While it follows the familiar beats of the cartoon, the fairy world was really unique, and I like the characters' new backstories. It is a bit girl bossy, but I like that they made Maleficent a little more morally gray instead of an outright villain. And honestly, Angelina Jolie just knocked it out of the park. Then there was Cinderella in 2015, which I consider the last genuinely good live-action remake. Story-wise, it's basically identical to the original 1950 cartoon, but it makes up for that lack of originality by expanding on the characters, getting rid of the songs, and perhaps most memorably, having really, really great production design. There's no repeated dialogue or shots from the animated movie, so you can't immediately compare the two, which helps them stand out on their own as individual projects. It's probably my favorite of the Disney live-action remakes, so I've got to give props to Kenneth Branagh. At this point, we're only 3 movies into Disney's new live-action remake era, but I'm already starting to feel burnout. But I seem to be the only one, with every new Disney remake bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars, even though the stories got less and less creative. 2019 was the year that really turned me off to the Disney remake, with Dumbo, Aladdin, The Lion King, and Lady and the Tramp all being released. That's 4 Disney remakes in 1 year. Is that not completely insane? Of these, Dumbo was probably the most original, but in all of the wrong ways, whereas The Lion King brought absolutely nothing new to the table. There's a time for photorealism, and that was not it. Fast forward to today, and Disney has remade almost 20 of their animated films, with 2016's Moana being the most recent project to get the live-action treatment. Although I question if we can even call it live action when 90% of it seems to reuse the digital assets from the original movie. Admittedly, I'm not a huge fan of Moana to begin with. Don't hate me. I do think that it looks really good, but I never really connected with the characters, and I'm personally not a fan of Lin-Manuel Miranda's music style, so the soundtrack doesn't really do it for me either. I knew that Moana was popular with the general public, but I didn't think that it was this huge worldwide cultural phenomenon the way that Frozen is. So imagine my surprise in 2023 when Disney announced that they were planning to release a sequel series and a live-action remake. Keep in mind, the movie wasn't even 10 years old yet. I was fairly confident that both of these projects were going to flop, but boy oh boy, I couldn't have been more wrong. The series was reworked into a feature film and brought in $1 billion, even though it was absolute dog shit. And it seems like the executives at Disney think that the live action has the same potential, but I really hope it doesn't. I can already hear the comments going, "Why do you care? It's for kids." But I'm of the firm belief that children deserve good movies too. And at one point, Disney agreed with me. And that determination to make movie magic is not only what led to them becoming a leader in the animation industry, but a cultural staple. Obviously, because Disney is a company, they've always wanted to turn a profit. But they did so as a way of funding their creative endeavors. Just look at their wartime era, a 7-year period during the 1940s made up exclusively of propaganda shorts and cheaply made anthologies. The company was only able to stay afloat during World War II because of these projects. And once they found their footing again, they released Cinderella, a musical, visual, and cultural achievement. Time and time again, Walt Disney risked bankruptcy in order to bring his creative vision to life, because first and foremost, he was an artist. Disney's current CEO, Bob Iger, is just a businessman, and that is abundantly apparent in the projects that he prioritizes. They're not art, they're content. Imagine if the only Disney movies that existed were these live-action remakes. Do you think the company would be even half as successful as it currently is? No, they're just relying on brand recognition and decades of goodwill, which is why people are still showing up even though they're churning out trash. This year alone, Disney has reported a profit of $2.5 billion. That means that even if they made a movie that cost $300 million and not a single person went to see it, they would still be fine. I get it, they have to keep shareholders happy, but my God, have some respect for yourselves. Or at the very least, have some respect for the people that you're asking to spend $20 on a ticket. Just look at Apple TV, which is backed by the ever-profitable Apple products. They're constantly taking creative risks, which has worked in their favor, with projects like Severance, Ted Lasso, and Pluribus being awards show darlings. When was the last time that Disney won a meaningful award? I just find Disney to be a sellout and kind of a wimp in comparison. And if it were me, I'd want more than remakes and sequels to be my legacy. Now, before anyone tries to claim that the live-action Moana movie is great for representation and we should be supporting it for that reason alone, I strongly disagree. I think it's important to acknowledge that Disney has a history of performative progressiveness. Just look at the queer characters that they shove in the background, or the race-swapped characters whose actors they don't even bother to defend from their racist fandom. And I find their representation of the Pacific Islands similarly shallow. This is perhaps most obvious in the live-action Lilo and Stitch, which no longer criticizes the exploitation of the islands and its people like the animated version, and instead has Lilo running around hotels and hanging out at commercialized luau's. Disney's recent attention towards the Pacific Islands just raises a lot of red flags for me, because I find it blatantly obvious that they're just trying to funnel people into their incredibly expensive resort on Oahu, where the cheapest rooms are about $700 a night. I mean, the average person who stays at the Disney Aulani Resort probably doesn't even know that haka, hula, and ori are completely different dance styles from cultures that have thousands of miles of ocean between them. A misconception that's only exacerbated by films like Moana, which takes inspiration from multiple places in Polynesia and presents them as a monolith. All of Hollywood only ever depicts two versions of the islands, as this mystical place to bring your family on vacation, or as a place filled with savages who need to be saved by the white man. But there's very little exploration of their actual history. No one wants to make a movie about the overthrow of the Hawaiian kingdom, or the internment camps that popped up after Pearl Harbor, or the lasting impact of nuclear testing in the Marshall Islands. Think about how many movies there are with characters who are obsessed with surfing. Now, are there any movies about Duke Kahanamoku, the Hawaiian Olympian who popularized the sport internationally? Or think about how Hollywood can make the dozenth biopic about a white musician who does drugs and cheats on his wife, but God forbid we make a movie about Israel Kamakawiwo Ole, even though his rendition of Over the Rainbow is almost as popular as the original. And if all of that sounds too depressing for an audience who wants to see something like Moana, there are hundreds of beautiful folktales around Polynesia that could serve as inspiration for a new movie, like the story of the naupaka, a flower that's native to the islands that's missing half of its petals, inspiring a folktale about two lovers who are separated by the gods. Or there are the many adventures of Tauhaki, who kills sea monsters and goes to the heavens to find his wife. There are some great stories about Pacific Islanders that have been released in the last few years, like Next Goal Wins and Tina. But because they aren't trying to sell you a coconut bra or a Mai Tai, people don't care. I just can't help but compare the live-action Moana movie to Chief of War, which besides being filmed in the islands of Hawaii, also had entire villages and canoes built to properly depict the culture. I mean, from the trailer alone, you can tell that the majority of Moana was filmed on a closed set with tennis balls as stand-ins for animated characters. Even Catherine Laka'aya's naturally curly hair, which is a perfect match for the animated Moanas, was straightened for the movie to make it easier to chroma key. In this day and age, where people are trying to replace real human creativity and ingenuity with AI slop, these live-action Disney remakes just feel like a slap in the face as a consumer. They're not even bothering to give us anything good. They're just scraping the bottom of the barrel. But unfortunately, people are still eating it up and asking for seconds. And it's to the point where I'm starting to feel like the crazy one for finding issues with it. I had some hope that we might finally be reaching the end of the live action era after the lackluster reception to Snow White, which actually led to several planned remakes like Bambi, The Aristocats, and Robin Hood being scrapped. But it's the success of Moana that will likely make or break any of Disney's future live action plans, like Tangled and Hercules. And while I hate to wish for the downfall of a project that hundreds of people worked on, I think it's time for Disney to learn an important lesson. What are your thoughts on the live-action Moana movie? That's it for this video, and I will see you next time. Bye!